Welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals. Here we are. We're joined by Nick K, and he's been with the channel. You probably know him if you know anything about the channel. So welcome aboard, Nick. So we're talking today about terraforming in response to the meaning crisis. Now, the word crisis sounds pretty important, like something bad has happened, and I suspect that a lot of folks don't even recognize that there is a crisis going on or what the consequences of that crisis are, what those consequences are. So, my understanding is that you're going to introduce two new concepts to us to address the meaning crisis. But before we look at those concepts, uh, can you take a couple seconds and tell us what the meaning crisis is anyway? Why do we need to address it?
Yeah. The meaning crisis uh, that I'm referring to, we have referred to on the channel before, and it's kind of all over the YouTube space. But it's mainly articulated by John Vervaeke. He's kind of sort of the uh, the progenitor of like the proclamation of the meaning crisis. So he has his 50-part series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, and just recently published a book for the first half of that, which is sort of the uh, investigation and development of an argument uh, as an explanation of the origins of the meaning crisis. And more or less in a couple seconds, what he is saying is that the West as a whole has uh, moved into a crisis of meaning uh, within which people's sense of connectedness to uh, to a home, to an existential sense of a place of belonging and being, has been sort of stripped away. He uses the word domicide
Mhm.
a lot, which is an existential sense of homelessness, or a not belonging, and the consequences and or symptoms of this domicide or meaning crisis is the rise of anxiety, depression, general mental health, well-being. Suicide rates are rising in certain populations, certain demographics, all of that stuff, and these are all sort of pointers to a loss of a sustainable sense of meaning in life, um, with which you know one can sort of cultivate and continue to uh, feel a sense of significance or value, worthwhileness. So that's in a general sense the sort of paradigm that we're addressing. And
Yeah.
mhm.
Well, yeah, on the channel before we talked about meaning and how John Vervaeke breaks it down into basically four different things. Not that those should be seen as, you know, exhaustive of everything that constitutes meaning, but it helps wrap your mind around it. And those four things would be significance, purpose, coherence, and mattering. Feeling like you're significant, feeling like you have a purpose in life, like something matters, and like your worldview is coherent. And with regard to the anxiety and depression, one of the emerging theories about anxiety and depression is less about chemical imbalances and is more about being out of touch with the reality in which you find yourself, not being aligned with it. Something's wrong because you're aiming for something, you're operating by proxies, and you're being insulated from real reality. And that when you notice that but don't know what to do about it, you start to get anxious and sometimes depressed. Um, Yeah. So a couple things I have. I was looking over your document that you sent. Things in the meaning crisis would be things like existential and cultural fragmentation, loss of
Yeah.
participatory knowing, need for transformative philosophical practices in order to get a person to be resilient. When you say domicide, for people in the audience, that may be a strange word, but you could think of homicide. It's like domicide when you domesticate. It's like the death of your home, the death of what you consider to be your home. It's no longer there. Almost like you're a refugee put in a new place that you don't understand. So this has had an effect on people, and I think another aspect of this is that a lot of our institutions, such as the way jobs work, the way churches work, the way families work, these institutions have kind of sustained coherence for people for a while. And now we're in the place where all of the institutions are being questioned. People don't trust government. People don't trust the information they're receiving. They don't trust college or university. They don't trust that perhaps the church is really has their best interest in mind, or that institutions like marriage are uh, really what we help us thrive right now, if that makes sense. And that I really don't want to go through the time to unpack that. And I'm not talking about marriage per se, but the way it's done today, the
Yeah.
way the government is involved with it, kind of thing. All the all the unintended consequences that come along with it for so many people that they didn't think about when they got into it. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we're in a meaning crisis in so many different ways, and a lot of people talk about the meta crisis, which is a crisis in a lot of other areas, and the meaning crisis is really just one particular domain of the meta crisis. Anyway,
Yeah.
so
Well, yeah. So yeah, just sort of trying to frame it in that way where we're sort of trying to address, well, so what I'm doing is for the past months or whatever, I've been uh, pursuing a master's degree and in philosophy, and in order with the intention of uh, laying the groundwork, doing the quote unquote academic rigor in order to become a philosophical counselor. That's ultimately my end goal. But in the completion of this master's degree, I'm going to attempt to write a thesis, specifically within the paradigm of uh, John Vervaeke's proclamation of the meaning crisis, because
mhm,
I think there are, in the academic world, it's something that people are addressing, but more importantly, in I guess you could say the intellectual dark web space, or the uh, just the general cultural space, like this is a thing that is gaining traction, and I think that there are some notions. There's a grammar set. There's a language set that has some. If it doesn't have some holes in it, it at least has some conceptual things that could be developed in order to help people, uh, you know, understand more thoroughly what's going on, and moving into a phase about, okay, what are some potential solutions, or what are some potential avenues with which we could deal with this. And funny enough, we had an FSI session last night,
mhm,
uh with which we were sort of circling around a potential phase shift of, we've had all this time in development over the past years, and there may be a a phase shift going on with FSI, and in the world, or the West at large, where we sort of kind of know that there's a meaning crisis. There's some people who are able to sort of articulate it. There's some people who it's just sort of it's in the background, and sort of eroding away at certain things. But there is a cohort and a paradigm of groups and individuals that have started to develop practices and different distributive cognition cohorts in order to address the meaning crisis in whatever articulation of it that they may have. Like, you and I have spoken about a faith crisis,
Yep.
which
Yep.
is sort of in its own way a particular articulation of the meaning crisis.
Right. Right.
Um,
Or a segment of it. Yeah.
right, exactly. And so what I'm kind of attempting to do is to actualize or actuate FSI's uh, uh, current power, and attempt to uh, offer a conceptual articulation of what I think may be going on in these spaces, and to try and use FSI as a cultivation field to
Hmm.
help me and help FSI potentially co- uh, erect some sort of a understanding, and not necessarily a prescription, but definitely a a a conceptualization of what we might be doing. Um, and therefore, if we have a degree of understanding of what we might be doing, and good, specific, precise words and concepts to apply, then we can understand what our larger goal set might be, and potentially have a better chance at developing practices and developing um, appropriate responses to this meaning crisis. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to initiate today. Is I kind of struggle with writing a little bit, because at heart I'm not an academic at all, like at all. So before I'm prepared to write, 60 to 80 pages of sis. It's like, that's a huge undertaking for me. I think it would be a good idea to begin to rehearse, with
The ideas,
the ideas with
bounce them around a
those,
little bit.
right, with those people, and have it documented. That way I could potentially even track um, you know, the development of the thought in a more distributed way,
Yeah.
because I mean that's what FSI was, initiated to, and how it was conceived. And a lot of the ideas, the key, like absolutely key ideas in this articulation that I'm developing are specifically from work that's been done in at Beyond the Fundamentals, and specifically in FSI. Um, so I kind of feel like it's appropriate to attempt to start to, you know, uh, get on the bicycle and start pedaling down the driveway with the training wheels off, or with the training wheels on, and rehearse, and then, take from the interlocutor, what's being added here. Take from some of the people in FSI what might be helpful here. And you know, another benefit of this is, with FSI, we have developed, a degree of our own language for certain things. You've come up with, countless sorts of um, you know, concepts and ideas that we have tried to apply in some of the practices. I mean, the NERC, non-epistemic rating criteria, that's a conceptual thing that's helped people frame what might be going on in a particular situation.
Hmm.
We have Protocol X, we have Rule Omega, we have all of these different things that help us understand in live time what may be going on with ourselves. And really, ultimately, this articulation of terraforming is meant to focus on the large or the shared structural aim of transformation that a vast variety of uh, groups and uh, organizations of people are saying that they're aiming at. Like, so, you'll hear people who are aware of the meaning crisis say, okay, well, we need to transform, right? So, transformation is like a huge thing. And what I'm attempting to do is give a more specific articulation of what kind of transformation I think we are all aiming at as a shared structure.
Yeah, I kind of
So
want to amplify a couple things real quick, to bring a few things home for individuals. The concept of transformation might seem very nebulous, and it's kind of really simple as an individual. It's it's a simple. You don't have to know any vocabulary or anything. Just to simply take a look at your own life and ask the question: where do I have pain points and frustrations? Where do I have things that do not turn out as I intend them? And how can I stop the pain? How can I stop the suffering? And what can I do either with myself and or with somebody else to prevent similar pain from occurring again? So, like unnecessary similar pain. Understand there are some growth points that people have to go through. People are going to suffer, but when we have unnecessary suffering that's preventable, but we go through it anyway, I think the question is, how do I not have that pain? How do I help others avoid that pain? How do I
yeah,
help get others out of that pain?
yes,
And so the it's almost like in life, if we are not in touch with base reality, it's kind of like walking through your living room blindfolded, huh, when there's sharp furniture everywhere and Legos all over the floor. Like everywhere you step, you're going to be in pain. And so, what you might do is try to develop the capacity to see. If you could see, then you could avoid banging your shin into the coffee table and stepping on Legos, even though they're there. So we can't change the environment in which we find ourselves. I know you could sweep up Legos, but for the sake of the world around us, we can't necessarily change the environment in which we find ourselves, but we can enhance our capacity to see it better so that we stop interacting with it in a way that results in pain and anxiety and frustration and unintended consequences.
yeah, and
So,
that
and
that
then,
helps me that helps me
yeah,
make a little bit more clear about what I'm attempting to do, which is what I'm attempting in that little analogy. Not I'm attempting to describe and investigate what kind of seeing, like, what's the geometry, what's the shape, what's the form of the seeing that we need to do in order to reduce the pain in the room with the sharp
yeah.
furniture and the legs on the
How
floor.
do we get
That's
that
what I'm
seeing?
attempting to do,
Yes.
right? I'm not prescribing some kind of doctrine. I'm not
Right.
prescribing at all. What I'm saying is that this is the kind of transformation that I think that I'm observing we are all trying to do in response to the meaning crisis. I'm trying to provide a higher degree of clarity and precision, uh, that in an attempt to offer the people a clearer understanding of just what they might be doing in an effort to propel them to double down and go further into it, because I
Yeah.
think it's right.
So, and one thing, um, just for the audience's benefit, one of the struggles that we have is like most people have come out of, if you're looking at spiral dynamics or if you're looking at Fowler stages of faith, most people have come out of institutions that we would call either blue in spiral dynamics or stage three in Fowler stages of faith. And the model that's used really doesn't matter. These just try to help us identify, or what Richard Rohr would call first half of life wisdom. And there's a temptation when it's time to go into second half of life wisdom or the next phase of consciousness or capacity, however you want to call it. There's a temptation to recreate the institutional structures and the dogmatic structures that characterized your previous stage of development. And the problem is that those kinds of structures are not appropriate for moving on to higher capacities and higher consciousnesses. So to fight off that tendency, there's a tendency to want to bring structure to something that will have the unintended consequence of causing it to backslide down into left hemisphere propositional tyranny. It'll
Yes.
drag back down. So
Yes.
it's kind of like going between Skillet and Charybdis, where I've got to figure out some way to bring some structure to where people have a kind of a guardrail to hang on to when they're new to the skating rink, but also not over engineer it into something that's
Right.
in our own image.
Right. Right. You were cautioning against this last night, and
Yep.
to be clear, um, I am not. I'm not attempting to again prescribe some sort of a doctrine or a structure. Well, I'm already assuming that everybody who's listening is in agreement that in order to address the meaning crisis, individuals and groups and organizations need to transform. I'm assuming that people are in agreement about that they need to transform. What I'm attempting to do is to give voice and a grammar scheme to the kind of transformation that I think we are all sharing
Yep. Yep.
in agreement with. And this is actually also important with addressing your concern about um how to implement the appropriate amount of constraint and structure versus how much uh potential space you're holding, like Kayla was talking about last night, and John, about how much potential space you're holding for something to emerge
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
you have no way to pre-specify. And
It's almost like
so
planting something. It's almost like planting seeds in a garden,
yep,
and you don't know what they're going to be, but you know
yes,
you're going to be able to eat it when it brings forth fruit. So you have to
yes,
provide space for
right.
that to happen.
Yes, and we will just again, we'll get to that in terms of uh the architecture and the geometry with which I'm going to use in order to describe the kind of transformation that I think we're all sharing.
Yep.
But one of the uh the works that I'm constantly giving reference to is, which we kind of need to understand, And it's way easier to understand than like IDM. Um, but if we can get a hold of this understanding, it's a work by Alicia Uraro in uh, uh, dynamic structural dynamic theory, and what she's saying and what we want to get a hold of in terms of dynamical systems is a true dynamical system is something that we understand in a vertical way primarily. And at the top, we conceptualize the structures at the top as what she calls selective structural constraints. And then at the bottom, she has what would be called like variance and um like enabling emergent constraints. So this is like Neoplatonism 101, where you have emergence at the bottom from the
Mhm.
bottom up,
Mhm.
and you have what they call emanation
Emanations. Yep.
from the top down. And a dynamical system, a good example is something like evolution, uh, is that evolution is natural selection based on variance and mutation. And so what ends up happening when when a dynamical system starts to kind of uh get going like an engine, which she actually calls a virtual engine, it's when the proper amount of emergent variation, which is the the thing we were talking about last night, where the the cultivating of the land, the opening in the opening of the land in order to make room for seeds, like potential space, uh,
Yeah.
that's cultivating an emergent uh landscape in order for those structural selective constraints to sort of form their way down into. And so what ends up happening is that those selective constraints, um, uh, 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 in a sense, choose what sort of stands out as relevant to the particular bottom up variance that's going on. So it's selective in that way. And so once it makes that particular selection, then a new set of variants uh, will emerge that is unforeseen, but still like relevant, right? It's not like just out of nowhere or completely out of left field. Like there but a new set of emergence can now come forth by which a new top-down selection process and constraint can be made. And then we start to get something that's moving in its own way. Um so we want to understand dynamical systems in that way in order to then start to begin to talk about um, ways in which we can make choices in educating ourselves and others and groups that we're a part of in terms of like the sort of practices that we might want to prescribe. So we have a fairly decent understanding of whether or not you're making a choice that's going to put too much selective constraint and too much structure and sort of smother the possibility space
Right. Right.
for someone to say something new or to say something insightful. And then we what we also don't want to have is not enough selective constraint to where all we have is just, sort of irrelevant but maybe sort of fertile ground that things are really not going to emerge out of because there's no selective constraint being like, ooh, right there. And part of an FSI session is to start to develop the capacity to track the relevant content of the conversation or of the movement of the group. And what that starts to do is starts to train your senses, right? To say, "Oh, there's the selective constraint right there." But also, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, it's too much. We're suppressing too much, because, maybe this person isn't speaking for enough time, or we're not, like, educing out of them enough of, what they might be trying to say, so we need to kind of back off the selective constraint there and not have this, like, propositional tyranny in our mind so much about where this is going and let them kind of work through what might come up, right? So it's like a calibrating process of, how much are we constraining in a particular instance, and how much are we allowing for something new or insightful to emerge out of this certain thing, right? So that sort of kind of clear?
Yeah, yeah, for me it is. The I I guess a few years ago I came to embrace the paradox of emanations and emergence, where it's like the very simplest form of this thing is the chicken or the egg, which came first.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
you've got to have one to get to the other, and it's kind of a cycle. Um but there's something paradoxical, and I don't want to say miraculous or magical, but there is a point where both are needed,
Mhm.
but it's almost like the relationship between the two is more fundamental than that which brings forth the things that relate, that causes the emergence of the emanations.
Yeah.
Think from the top down and from the bottom up. And so there's this. So dancing in a dynamic system is it has to be very fluid and moving. There's no particular steps that you can learn. There's not a choreography.
Yep.
But you have to be able to move with it and sense it and know when it's time to lead and when it's time to follow. And there's no way you can teach those kinds of things. So the cultivation of wisdom is important in that. When I was in the army, we made a difference between the words constraints and restraints.
Mhm.
And um, a constraint was something that you must do, such as you must occupy this hill by 4 p.m. tomorrow. A restraint is something that you're not allowed to do, but you can't shoot the red cockaded woodpecker because it's an endangered species. Something I'm
Right.
just kind of being goofy with that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think it would be interesting. You've used the word constraints a lot of time, multiple times, and almost sounds like the way we would have used the word restraint, like things, things we want to avoid doing. Let's
Mhm.
not do this, not do this, and not do this. And then there's constraints, which are here's the things that we are attempting to do.
Mhm.
And sometimes the things that we're attempting to do, uh, they can't be engineered specifically. We have to find the way to nurture it into place, kind of like sailing or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a give and a take to it.
Right. And here, so let me introduce this. You said that there's something more fundamental than either one of, so it seems like there's something more fundamental than either one of uh the positions that are constraining each other, which is somehow, we know, especially from like IDM, that what's more fundamental is the relationship, right? So in your example of the chicken or the egg paradox, right? So what's really cool about that is that there is something that's more fundamental than the chicken or the egg. and that is their relation. And what's really helpful is to understand that the relevant relation that is more fundamental in regard to the chicken and the egg paradox is the relational notion of dependence.
Say
So,
that again.
it's the relational notion of dependence.
Okay.
So what I can say, because I've introduced this notion, this relational notion of dependence, is now I have a structure, an imminent structure, an imminent relational structure by which I can judge and I can understand the paradox more clearly. And then you can ask me which came first, the chicken or the egg. And if I have the relational notion of dependence in my mind, it's the chicken, because the egg is more dependent on a chicken than a chicken is on an egg. Now, because they're relational, there's no way to completely separate them and say, well, the chicken is dependent on the egg. Yes, it is, because they're related. But in the relational notion of dependence as a overall structure, the chicken is a more dynamic and potent uh I'm sorry, it's a more dynamic and actualized dynamical system. And an egg is much more unidimensional and less dynamical, and therefore there's more of a load of dependence that the chicken can bear that the egg cannot. And so you start to see where in these relational structures, if we understand them in terms of dependence, then we start to see that the structure is actually asymmetrical based on dynamical systems. And so, because the chicken is more dynamic, the egg is more dependent on it. And so now we can start to answer these paradoxical questions, um, and get a little bit more clarity on whether or not we need a little bit more top down selective constraint, the chicken, or more emergent, varying potential constraints,
That
the
yeah,
egg.
that's the word I was looking for, potential, because while the chicken is more dynamic, the
Egg is
well,
has more potential.
it has more potential to
It does.
become more dynamic than
Yes.
than the first chicken,
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
which I
100%.
think would bring us to your term of uh, transdescendants. So, do you want to introduce your two terms and
Sure.
explain
Yeah.
what they are?
Yeah. Yeah. So I need everybody to kind of give me as much grace as possible here, because this is an idea that I'm in the process of developing, and I'm introducing to you guys at a stage where I can articulate it, but I'm asking for I'm trying to I'm trying to distribute the idea in order to reflexively um understand more about it. So, I guess there's so many different ways with which I can enter this idea. And I was kind of wrestling about which would be the best avenue to take in terms of FSI or beyond the fundamentals. But I guess I'll do it this way. Um, so I told you I'm not an academic, which I'm not. But I am, by trade and by skill, a trained wrecker, crane operator. And the principles by which I do wrecker operating or crane operating are absolutely analogous and identical to the kind of transformation that I want to propose is the kind of transformation that folks are undergoing or attempting to achieve when we're doing FSI or we're doing any kind of dialogical practices meant to, uh, connect us uh, uh, to the world and cultivate more meaning and a sense of home, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of significance, and all of that like we were talking about.
Mhm.
So, I guess I'll enter it by explaining how a wrecker operator performs a recovery, and that will give a nice picture, structural picture on what I mean by the notion of terraforming. Because the proposal is the kind of transformation that folks are attempting to achieve or trying to undergo in response to the meaning crisis is terraform. It's transformation is sort of an umbrella term for what I mean by terraform.
Mhm.
Um, so a wrecker operator is trying to deal with what we call a recovery. So we're recovering a load that has been overturned, has been uh, wrecked, or is in some kind of crisis. It's stuck. It can't get out. So in this analogy, I know how to perform a recovery. Um, and in the meaning crisis, what we're trying to recover or overturn or retrieve is a sense of meaning and home and existential weight and significance, right? But one of the first things that a wrecker operator does when he's going to recover a vehicle that has been overturned is he's gonna I want to know, what does the load weigh? How much does it weigh? Um, Generally speaking, because he has to in some ways upright it or be able to sort of pull on it, get a purchase on uh
On the
on the thing
payload. Yeah.
right in order to have it recovered. Um, so in this case, in the case of the meaning crisis, uh, the load weighs a lot more than what we can handle, like what we can get, really move because it's so much larger existentially than we are. So we need to learn how to put our wreckers or ourselves in a configuration to gain leverage, mechanical leverage over this load. And so what a wrecker operator will do is a wrecker is set up with what we call a boom, and it has some winches that go from the center of the boom and they go up and over it, and you can lift this boom from a horizontal to a particular degree of height or a particular angle,
Yeah.
and then you can also extend it, right? So you can extend it out. And then you have at the bottom of the wrecker, you have what are called outriggers or jack legs.
Mhm.
And what you can do is you can put those jack legs down on the ground and sort of start to lift the tires of the wrecker off the ground in an attempt to kind of stabilize the wrecker
Mhm.
as the boom is going up and up and up and up. So what you have is a very large lever. And but there are many cases where your wrecker weighs less than the load that you are going to try and move. And there's a bunch of, mathematical calculations that you can do and blah blah blah, but that's not really that important for this analogy. Um, so in the dynamical system of a wrecker, what you have is a boom, a transcendent boom, which can point itself at the sky and it can extend to a particular point. Um, based on the operator's calculation or judgment. And what will happen is 9 times out of 10 with when I'm training wrecker operators is they don't put their boom to a particular height. What they do is they put it about here, and then they take their winches and they send it straight out horizontally to the load, which weighs more than they do, and then they actuate the winch, and all that happens is the wrecker starts dragging towards the load.
Yeah.
So the truck moves. It you don't have enough leverage in order to move something that weighs more than you do.
Right.
That 9 times out of 10, this is what new operators do. They just take the winch and they run it horizontally right to the load, and they start winching, and they go, "Oh, no, the truck is moving. What the heck? I need a bigger truck. I need a bigger truck." No, you don't. You don't need a bigger truck. What you need to do is you need to set up a dynamical system. And you need to set up that dynamical system in a terraformative way. And so what you do is you take your boom and you set it to a particular transcendent uh, point. And then you don't extend the boom fully, because what you'll get, second level operators doing is extending the boom all the way out here. And then uh, when they actuate the winch, when they have the winch line is going down all this way, is they hit the winch, and then the truck starts to go like this. It starts to tilt forward like a seesaw, right? So you don't have enough leverage, right? So the front end of the truck is coming up like that. So in this sense, you have a version of transformation. You have a form or a configuration which is too transcendent. It's too focused on transcendence. And this is what I see with a lot of the the current theories and current doctrines of transformation is there's too much of an abstract uh, prerogative to transcend, right? And that people get very frustrated with this because they there's they're doing the things that they know that they're supposed to do, like, oh, you need to read more books, you need to pray to God more, you need to go to church more, you need to transcend your mind in order to transform into the image of Christ, or to conform to the image of Christ, or something like that. So we get the vast majority of people who are interested in transformation, they are they are focused on setting their boom to an angle and then extending that boom too much, and then they lose their mechanical leverage, and then the truck just tilts forward, right?
So
and
what would
and
be
when
the proverbial boom in someone's life that they are extending too far?
Their aspirations.
Okay.
It's their aspirations. And so you can have a maxim, which I kind of mashed two of them together, because uh you have the saying, um uh a man's reach should exceed his grasp, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you have another maxim, which is a man's ambition should not exceed his worth. So now if you put those two together, so which I've done, which is
Did you say
a
should not exceed his work or worth?
worth, his
Worth.
worth. Yeah. So if you put those two together, what you get is a little dynamical system and a way to calibrate. So you say a man's reach should exceed his grasp. That's invoking aspiration. You should aspire to something higher, right? But your ambition should not exceed your worth. So what we have in this, again, proverbial boom, is you want to be careful about what you're aspiring to transcend towards, right? Because this is the Luciferian sort of failure, is to he says, I will what does he say? transcend. I will ascend above the throne of God. So
Mhm.
Lucifer's got his boom way too far out, and he can't get a purchase on the meaning there because his aspiration is too far away from the ready, here's the word, imminent ground. Because
Or proximal zone of development.
yes, well, that's what you're trying to achieve here in the configuration of your wrecker in order to set up a terraformative stance, right? So, um, I tell when I'm training these guys, or when I'm in on a recovery on my own, doing it myself, the words that the men who have trained me how to perform a recovery, like my father, my dad, he says he says it to me, Nick, put the truck in the ground. Put the truck in the ground. And he says it with a lot more swear words, believe me. Put like screaming, put the truck in the ground, right? So what does he mean by that? He means put your boom up at about a 45 to 50-degree angle. Extend that boom so that it is vertically in line with the two jack legs, right?
Yep.
So don't extend it past the jack legs, and don't keep it in, towards the chassis of the truck. Put it about vertically in line with
Mhm.
with those two jack legs.
Mhm.
Then run your winch lines up and over the boom, right? And bring it down to the load. And then what's going to happen is that when you actuate that winch, what's going to happen is the force is going to start to lift the load up, which means the tip of the boom is going to provide this driving force down into the jack legs. And what the jack legs are going to do is they're going to go into the ground. They're going to force into the ground, right? And so this is like totally amazing when this happens, and it's like it's super vitalizing and visceral when you feel a truck, or a record do this. Um, because what's going to happen is those legs will start to build up like aggregate, like in the ground, like the dirt will start to kind of coalesce, and it's planting and rooting
Pack in there.
itself in
Yeah.
the ground. And then what you do with the rigging is you bring that line down to the load, and then you can like put like a pulley on the load and bring that line back down into the jack legs and rig it to the jack legs at the root. And that, or you could take another winch line right from here and do a horizontal pull, right? So what you get is this picking mechanism, right? That's using the leverage of the boom to force the truck into the ground, and then you use horizontal lines in order to start to pull, get a purchase, and recover the unit that weighs more than you do. So in effect, what you're doing is you're using transcendence, the transcendent boom, in order to earth yourself, in order to plant yourself into the ground. And then once you have all of that energy and all of that rootedness into the ground, that stability, well, they say nothing weighs more than the earth. So now you have all of this mass of weight that you can now just winch the thing towards you. And
This
and
this is
and then
now
the whole
leverage you
load
can
starts
use.
to move, right? So this this is the point where I'm I can introduce the notion of transdescendance. And there's gonna be two senses of this word, transdescendance. But what I want folks to sort of start to think about and start to utilize as a grammar scheme is that terraforming, which is the form or the stance that the wrecker is in order to recover a vehicle. Terraform is achieved through transcendence and transdescendence. And I'll explain why I mean why I'm not just saying descendants and I'm saying transdescendants. And the reason is because there's two senses in which um uh descendants is going to be utilized. So is that kind of following a little bit?
I think so. When I saw the word terraform, I I guess I was looking for terraforming is usually a sci-fi term where they talk
Yep.
about taking the moon or Mars and turning the land into a habitable place.
Aha. Okay,
So
what does that sound like to you? Like, just intuitively? Because I'm purposefully, exapting the word terraforming from sci-fi and from, different, uh uh, astronomical uh, research. And I'm exapting it and repurposing it and appropriating it into a more philosophical space, in a space of transformation. So I'm intentionally using that word, exapting it and repurposing it for what I think we are attempting to do in response to the meaning crisis through the practices we're trying to develop and the direction that the posture with which we are trying to deal with the meaning crisis. I think we're trying to make a home. I think we're
yeah,
trying to get ourselves into the ground, into the earth, right? And because you and I, we've already spoken about how a dynamical system works, right? So as one sort of constrains the other, and then the emergent properties or variant properties will start to constrain the relevant constraints that are appropriate for it, right? So the tip of the boom and the the potency or the power of the jacklegs down here are in a dynamical relationship,
hmm,
right? Um, so so yes, the intuition is right there in terms of why I'm using the word terraform is because I think that this is this is the kind of transformation that we are attempting here is a earth forming. We're trying to we're trying to cultivate. It's like what God says to Adam at in Genesis. Uh Cultivate the land, have dominion over it. Like, so he's kind of, I want you to terraform. So as we start to, sort of explicate this more, what I want people to do is to start to try to identify instances that you're observing in a movie, or when you're reading scripture, or when you're reading a book or listening to a conversation. Up, that's terraforming. That's terraforming through transcendence, and more importantly, transdescendence. Okay, so that's what I want people to come away with, is just a small sense of what it means to terraform, and what it means to terraform through transcendence, but more imminently transdescendence. And so now uh I can try and delineate the two senses in which I mean transdescendence. And so when you're thinking of terraform, think of transcendence as the boom of the truck in your aspirations, and then think of transdescendence as there's a twofold jacklegs that are meant to go to descend into the ground, right? So the first leg, and then, so we have the little thumbnail of this video as well, which is a little thing that I've been doing in order to try and uh allude to a sort of martial arts stance or posture of what terraform what the terraform would be in like a martial arts stance, right? And so you'll see Plato uh, with his boom or right arm ascending towards the sky, towards the sun, and the two legs, right, are the jack legs there, which are being rooted into the ground, descending down into the ground, where he's getting a purchase on the home, on the earth, on the sense of belonging, right? So he's in he's in terraform right there. So that's the geometry of it, right? Um, so yeah, right. So the human body is 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 formed, shaped into the posture, into the stance of what a wrecker might look like, right? And this is the form by which I think we are trying to achieve in response to the meaning crisis whenever we're trying to develop, a practice or develop um a maxim or a way of being in order to cultivate a sense of belonging and connectedness and meaning and purpose and all of that stuff. Um, Now, to address the two legs of transcendence.
Well, but before we get into
Mhm.
the two legs, if I could just tack on a little, like what I'm thinking is when you think of terraforming, um, something I've learned with vocabulary is that some people's vocabulary that they're using and the level of understanding that they have constitutes a restraint on how far they can see or transform. And so
Mhm.
what I've
Mhm.
learned is that if you can teach people, if you can expand their vocabulary and expand the concepts that they can understand, their
Yeah.
consciousness now has a place to fill into, now has a place to go.
Yes.
And so if somebody's creating like an AI bot or like a three-dimensional AI bot that lives somewhere in the land, they want to watch it do something, they have to provide a place for it to be first. It has to be somewhere. You can't just have something, it has to be somewhere. And I feel like the somewhere where humanity got used to being is no longer sufficient and we don't know what to do about it. So terraforming to me sounds like the recognizing the necessity to create a new place for us to move into,
Yes. Precisely.
because you can't, it's almost like you have to put, your fish will only get so big in a certain fish tank. It's almost
Yep.
like you have to get a bigger fish tank in order for it to continue growing, something like that.
Yes. Yes, run with it. So as you're starting to map this, right? Run with it. Watch where this notion will take you. And like it's you're going to be able to map this onto a lot of things. And so keep going, right? So let me introduce the 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 top down uh descendant aspect of terraforming. Um, so we have the ascending, transcendent notion, and we have it in in great amounts because whenever people talk about transformation, they treat transformation in one of two ways. They either treat it as a horizontal sort of movement, a sequential movement of this state to this state, to this state, to this state. It's a horizontal line, right?
Right, right.
If you
Linear.
get
It's a
some
linear thinking.
it's a linear thinking, right? But that linear thinking is dependent on a more vertical thing, a more vertical dimension, right? Because nothing can go this way if it doesn't yet have the space opened for it from a vertical top down bottom up dynamical system. So there's a aspect of dependence uh on from the horizontal on the vertical. So uh then the other form, or the other way you will get the notion of transformation, is that it's really conjugate or similar to transcendence, right? Which, okay, now we've got a vertical term, but transcendence only goes one way. It only goes up. And you don't hear people talking about transformation in a coextensive way, which is transcendence and transdescendence, right? So it kind of sounds a little bit counterintuitive to say that, oh, well, in order to transform, what you got to do is put your truck in the ground. You need to descend, right? So now we're in a position where we can reference um, the greatest terraformers ever, which are Jesus and Socrates. Because if we go over to um, Ephesians 4 9 and 10, right before we get to your, you know, again, revolutionary discovery, which, could I just side note for a second? Like, I just, you know how I feel about, your whole work with Calvinism and all of that. Like, it's just, it's, you're the best person in the entire world to deal with Calvinism. And like, I've told you this so many times that it's got to be like such a cool feeling to be like the best person in the world at a thing that is
That
so
doesn't pay.
widespread. Yeah. Well, maybe the best things don't. Who knows? Um, but but the other thing is that I don't think that you're there's enough there's enough appreciation and enough attention on the insight of the Ephesians 4 edification model, like the transition from uh, 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 teachers and preachers uh, in the distribution into the dynamical system that ought to become the church, right? But anyway, I think it's fitting that the uh, injunction of transdescendants comes precisely right before the Ephesians 4 edification model, which is Ephesians 4 9 and 10. And I don't know. Do you have it up? I, I,
Which
I
one?
see I see you working Ephesians 4 9 and 10.
Well, I can bring it up.
Mm-hmm. So we've noted the emphasis on the modern emphasis on transformation, and that if we do get anything about transformation, it's either one of two things. It's either too horizontal and sequential about this state to this state to this state to this state, or it's vertical. If it does have a vertical aspect, it's only about transcendence or ascending, which we've already said is sort of a Luciferian sort of failure. To only treat transformation as a transcendent aspiration is wrong. I think it's wrong. I think we're missing an absolutely crucial aspect of transformation. And the key to understanding terraforming is to understand transdescendence. Ephesians 4 9 and 10. Ready?
Yep.
Now, he that ascendeth, that's to transcend, going up. This is referring obviously to Jesus. He that ascended, what is it but that he also, ready, descended,
Hmm.
descended first, primarily, principally. He first
Wow.
descended. Descendants, transdescendants is primary over ascendance.
So that has to happen first.
It has to happen first. There's a level of dependence. We think that transcendence is the chicken and that descendance is the egg. It's not. Descendance in terraforming is the chicken. Descended first into the lower parts where of the earth. He's
Yeah.
terraforming.
Wow.
He that descended is the same also because these are coextensive things. You do not have terraforming if you just have descendants. And you do not have terraforming if you're just ascending into, above the throne of God or ascending into the next, intellectual the next intellectual insight that you get. That's not terraforming. That's just merely transcending and ascending above the throne of God. He that descended is the same also that ascended up above all the heavens. That he ready, but why? What was the purpose? That he might fill all things. That's to fill all of the meaning, all of the purpose, in order um, to perfect the whole of the universe. And then we can go over to into Colossians and the redemption of all things and the whole universe. I forget what those verses are. Where he redeems basically the whole cosmos. But he does that through terraforming. And so there
Here's
are
Colossians
those
1:20.
120. Um there are those who have said that when we talk about something like love, so we talk about in terraforming the emphasis on the descending aspect of this and the love that we need to cultivate for the world, for the earth, right? John 3:16, for example. uh John 3:16 is an orientation towards two things: towards the earth or the world, and towards God's descendant, which is his son.
Hmm.
Because when you say descend, what you mean is two things. You mean it's a double entendre. God's descendants is the actual act of the incarnation of descending down from heaven, and God's descendants are also would also be called the sons of God. So there are two legs to this descendants. There's two meanings to it. And one is the actual vertical movement of going down into the earth, uh, moving in a downward orientation, rooting down into the lower parts of the earth, right? In for the sake of fulfilling all things. Uh, then there's the aspect of your descendants, which is all of the things that propagate after you for the sake of uh, for the sake of something. So you have two legs of descendants that need to be understood in terraforming. That when when you're moving in this downward with this downward orientation in order to stabilize and root yourself into the ground, you are doing that for the sake of love. John Vervaeke defines love like if you want to know what you love, All you have to do is think about something that you would want to be around. What is the thing that you want to propagate or to be around even if you're not here?
Yep.
Okay? What's that called? Transdescendence. You are conceptualizing and doing something for the sake of a two-legged descension, right? Your descendants are those who will come after you even when you're gone. That's what a descendant is. So you're starting to see the two legs of terraforming that are moving down into the ground. Um, this is why we get the lineages all in the Bible. We get the descendants of Abraham. We get the descendants of Adam. We get the descendants of uh I was thinking King David in the book of Ruth, Boaz, the descendants of Boaz, right? But all of these descendants, I mean, each gospel starts in some way with a rendition of the descendants of dissension, right? Not
Except for Mark,
ascension,
yes.
not except for Mark, but Mark because it's looking at Jesus as a servant
Right,
with
right.
who is would be a person who would not have descendants, um, uh, or would not come from some kind of a lineage, a significance of lineage. But you look at Matthew and the descendants and lineage of the king. You look at Luke, the descendants and lineage of the Son of Man from Adam, and then in John, the descendants and lineage of of being itself. So there's a twofold sense in which I'm intending to use the word descendants, which is why it's called transdescendants.
So it's interesting to me how, um, in one sense, Jesus is described as having all this lineage all the way back to Adam. If you look at the book of Luke, and then at the same time, he's presented if Jesus is like Melchizedek, who is without father or mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. And so there's this idea where, yeah, for sure we can see where this thing came from, but there's another aspect of it that is randomly emergent and you can't
Yes.
tell where it came from.
Yes. Yes.
And you have both.
You have both. Exactly. You got to run with it. You just got to run with it and see what it brings out. So
Almost like
why?
IDM.
Yeah, yeah. So why are we concerned with the meaning crisis, right? So one of the other things I want to say is I said the two ultimate terraformers are Jesus and Socrates. So you understand Jesus's terraformation uh, in regard to his capacity to ascend, but more primarily to transdescend, right? And with Socrates, what you get is Socrates in the Platonic dialogues, in the drama of the Platonic dialogues, continually and symbolically going down to the Piraeus. And later on, after you get the cave analogy in book 7, you'll start to see that it's incumbent upon the philosopher king or the person who has ascended uh, to the through the three layers of reality to where they have come into contact with God or come into contact with the light of the sun, which is the symbol, that it's incumbent upon them to now descend back down into the cave twice in the analogy. So you only ascend once in the cave analogy. You transdescend twice, and hence the two legs. And it's very interesting as well with Socrates that Socrates in the Apology gets accused, gets put to death for two reasons. And those two reasons are impiety and introducing false gods and corrupting the youth. So
Hmm.
Socrates gets put to death for the very thing for the very symmetry of terraforming because worshiping false gods and introducing false gods uh, is an aspect of transcendence. He's transcending wrong, and then corrupting the youth is like
Descending
you're
wrong.
you're transdescending wrong. And Socrates willingly accepts the the the
The
the
sentence.
charges and is put to death. Drinks the hemlock. So you're going to see this uh uh this form, this terraform uh a lot when you're talking about trying to address the the meaning crisis or when you're trying to address any kind of uh obstacle that has to do with your connectedness to reality, connectedness to yourself, connectedness to your family, connectedness to, a sense of meaning and worth at work, or whatever you might be doing. I think that there is a shared structure of terraformation throughout any of these endeavors to transform into a person that you are aspiring to be. So that's sort of like a first stab, extemporaneous first stab at that. You know,
I'm thinking.
I got the notion from the movie Man of Steel, which is um a Superman movie with Henry Cavill as Superman.
Yeah.
Hans Zimmer does the score
Hmm.
for that movie. And by the way, if you I don't know if you've seen it, but for those who have seen it, there's a little scene where young Clark Kent is getting bullied, and he has this sort of understanding with his earthly father, John Kent, that he's not gonna, kind of reveal his powers and all of this stuff. He's not going to abuse it or anything like that. And these kids start bullying him, and they push him to the ground. And when he falls to the ground, he has a book in his hand, and he kind of like whatever. And if you look and you zoom in, you see that the book is Plato's Republic. And yeah, uh, but anyway, there when it gets to the scene where Superman or Clark Kent goes and finds his heavenly father, which is the Kryptonian Jor-El, um, and he learns his real name, which is Kal-El, uh, and Russell Crowe's character Jor-El tells Superman about his descendants, where his lineage is from. He tells him where he's from. Then Superman gets the suit and then starts to learn how to fly. And his heavenly father, the transcended father, starts to instruct him and tell him about how Earth's sun, if you aspire towards it and you orient towards it in this way, Earth's sun is more nourishing to your Kryptonian cells, your Kryptonian body. And what Superman starts to do is he starts to uh, dig his hands into the ground. And yep, there it is. Yep. He starts to dig his feet and dig his hands into the ground in an attempt to fly. Right? Um, so during that whole scene where Henry Cavill's Superman is learning how to fly, He's learning how to terraform, and I got this from Hans Zimmer's score. That the scene where he's learning how to do this, Hans Zimmer titled the track "Terraforming." So that's kind of how I got the idea. Yeah,
Oh, that's interesting.
that's how I got the language. Basically, is watching the Man of Steel and watching the patterns with which Superman learns how to become Superman. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Pulled up the little image here. I have so many PowerPoint documents open right now.
There it is. Yep. Yep. The ground begins to shake, and then he can fly. And then when he does start to fly, you start to see scenery of Superman kind of in nature within the mountains, and it gets progressively more and more uh, a larger view of the earth itself. And then he eventually goes through the atmosphere and then is observing the earth itself, and he's properly terraformed when he uses this power of the sun basically to descend back down into the earth, where he does all of his Superman things. He saves Lois Lane, and he picks up cars, and he does all of this, heroic stuff. So Superman
with
is a
with top down power
yes,
and bottom up purposes.
exactly, 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 right? And those bottom up purposes are given to him by his heavenly father and his earthly father. They're both instructing him and educing him to aspire to transcend, to show the people of the earth, to to love the people of the earth, to save the people of the earth. He's terraforming. That's the most modern uh symbolic rendition of terraforming, right?
So so we've got average Joe Pew sitter sitting in a church somewhere who's a little dissatisfied with what he's getting at church.
Mhm. Mhm.
And he recognize and there's some things in his life that aren't going how he's intending them to go. What does terraforming look like for him,
Mhm.
and what does transcendence look like for him? Like
Mhm. Mhm.
specifically.
Mhm.
Is-
Yeah. Yeah. What I see let me highlight the likely problems, and then maybe we can infer, what he needs to do. Uh if he's going to church, he's attempting to transform. And he's it looks like, given our two renditions of the only two ways that people are sort of instructed to transform, is either horizontally, which if it's horizontal, then it's just gonna drag the truck. Like, you're just gonna kind of move through the inertia of dragging towards the inevitable weight of existence, that you have no leverage over. You have no way um of of really dealing with. So if you're if you're at church and you just sort of feel like a dissociation, like, why am I even here? What am I even doing? Then you are probably in a place where you're in a horizontal sort of relationship with the meaning crisis. And the first solution to that is stick your boom up, right? So you need to aspire. So for that average churchgoer, solution number one, if there's a horizontal inertia pulling you towards nihilism, uh, you need to find things that inspire you. And so that you can have a conceptualization of what to aspire towards. So the question becomes, um, what gets you going? What what is it that, um, brings you into a space of, "Oh, I wanna be like that. Ooh," you know? But before all of the, like, "Oh, well," the judgment comes of like, "Oh, well, you can't be like that," and all of all of that stuff. What is something you could aspire to? That would be you raising your boom towards something. And then we have probably the more likely scenario, in a churchgoer is that they are trying to transform and they do have some degree of aspiration, but that degree of aspiration is a boom that's way too far out. So now you're not getting dragged towards the load, but you can't gain any mechanical leverage because you're just kind of collapsing. Like
Right.
the right? So that's probably somebody who's the churchgoer, who's trying to transform, who feels completely incapable, weak, and, uh, I had the word right at the tip of my tongue. Inadequate and overwhelmed. Overwhelmed was the word, right? So the truck that is aspiring and transcending, that has its boom too far out, is overwhelmed. So, um, the solution to an overwhelmed churchgoer is stop reading the Bible. Stop going to church because you have your boom too far out to a degree, like your aspirations about becoming the perfect Calvinist or becoming or ready here ascending to the statement of faith. Oh yeah, I assent to that. Stop ascending. Put your truck in the ground, right? So
Well,
stop.
one image that's popping in my head is you talked earlier about how like an inexperienced operator might just try to hook up their winch laterally, extend the
Horizontally,
boom
yes.
laterally, extend it laterally, then they wind up moving their truck instead of going laterally. And I
Right.
think what happens among the propositional forms of Christianity, like Calvinism, free grace, provisionism, and all these things, people extend their boom. And
Yes.
yeah, they're getting out of one area of the earth, but they're just moving laterally into something else that's the same, and they're not having any effect on the payload.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're
You
they're
have no
missing the
traction.
point.
Yes, you have no traction. You're not
Yeah.
going any
Yeah, no
you
purchase, no traction.
right, you're not going anywhere, right? But that's because you're not moving the load. You're actually just you're self-deceptively moving yourself towards the load instead of moving the load towards you,
Yeah.
right? Because you're not rooted enough. Because you are aspiring towards the wrong things. Your boom is too far out and overwhelmed by uh nonsense, right? So to that average churchgoer, um, you can identify uh, whether or not you are in a stale and lame sort of relationship with your meaning in life. If you're in a horizontal relationship, if you have no aspirations, right? You have no means of transcendence, right? And you're just going to move inertly towards the load, regardless of what you do. But then, like I said, the more likelihood is that or at least my experience with, let's say, Christians, is that they actually do have their booms set. They are trying to aspire towards something, but they're trying to aspire towards something that is actually overwhelming them and tipping them. Right, where they don't have any real leverage because nothing's rooted into the ground. And so the way uh, to counteract that, uh, uh, over aspiration or that hyper aspiration is to, like, again, stop, like, bring it in. bring it closer to the body, right? So we've been practicing that in FSI a little bit, and we should probably try to do it more often. Is try to um, engage and participate in more embodied practices, because when you've got your boom extended out like this and you have no leverage because it's tipping you over, you need to retract. You need to retract that aspiration and that transcendence closer to you. Put it in the body, right? So, um, that's that's really what I would in the terraforming analogy, that's what you would do, is you would try to get the aspirations closer to you. What hits more at home, right? So, like, you could ostensibly see the person, you know, that Christian, like, never talking about anything that's really hits close to home, because they're so caught up in like, listen to the language. Where caught up, like ascending, transcending towards all of this nonsense that doesn't ready hit home. It doesn't hit the body. It doesn't hit your heart. You're kind of dissociated with too many things. So maybe you need to be participating in practices, um, like FSI, for example, and not going to church on Sunday, where you listen to a preacher and you just kind of fall asleep, and you participate with a group that is going to do a more meditative practice, that's going to try to retract that aspiration more, and pay more attention to what's going on here. That's terraforming, because
So
Mhm,
like I said, it'd be kind of like grounding. Like what I try to tell people to do when it comes to we have these worldviews that are so vast and broad.
mhm,
Our God is the God of the cosmos, and He is
yeah,
sovereign over everything on the to the dark side of planet Nibiru. He governs everything, and so we have such a vast concept of our worldviews are so expansive that we don't.
yes,
What I try to tell people to do is back away from all of that, forget all of that, put
mhm,
it on the back burner, shelve it, 86 it, whatever, and just think about the way your feet feel on the floor right now, the way grass feels between your toes, the way the
mhm,
breeze feels on your skin, the sound of the birds outside.
mhm,
That's your paradigm. Start there. The fire's
yes,
hot. Don't touch it. Like you would with a little kid.
yeah,
And I advise people to start rebuilding your paradigm of how the world works and what governs
mhm,
it from the ground up based on experience, like
mhm,
Romans 5:4 says. Experience. Like use your experience, like tactile, very physical, tactile experience to start with.
mhm,
And then you're going to start noticing, oh, well, this gives me a certain emotion. When my wife looks at me with that expression on her face, I feel an emotion rise up in my body. So your awareness is drawn in close to you with
aha,
exactly what's happening right here around me and in my
aha,
body.
yes.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It's called terraforming.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've been observing, um, across so many of these practices and so many of these injunctions to do something, is I go, "Oh, Kevin's been telling people to terraform." Right. So you see, you see how I think that the language set is really helpful and precise, and allows, like you were saying before, a slightly new grammar scheme, which is very intuitive, by the way.
Yeah.
Like you hear terraforming, you kind of like, oh, like home, earth forming, cultivating myself in such a way, and then there's There's not just this constant ascendance, right? You need to transdescend. You need descendants. You need descendants. You need things to propagate after you. That
Well,
when you're not, you're not around. Plant the seeds now.
yeah, the analogies that we're talking about, say with Superman, for example, uh, seems like there's a lot to unpack there. For example, when the time comes that you need to launch, like
Hmm.
you need to take off flying, you need to go do the thing, whatever it is
Yeah.
you need to do. If you're sent like in the Superman movie, his hands and fists are buried into the ground. You can see the ground shaking, and then he takes off, and he has a solid place to take off from.
Hmm.
Right? If your paradigm for how the world works is based on very close to home grounding, what are my surroundings? What is my immediate environment? Do I feel it, touch it, taste it, see it, smell it? What am I feeling inside my body? What are these emotions? What's this welling up inside me? When it comes time to launch, you will all those things are real things, and you can really spring up and do something from a solid foundation that isn't going anywhere. But if the thing you're launching off of when you are called to action, like Optimus Prime says to Sam Witwicky, destiny rarely calls on us at a time of our choosing. So
Right.
when destiny comes and calls on you and it's your time to put your hands in, if all you have is a belief system that isn't grounded in anything real, you're going to be jumping off a broken diving board.
Yes.
You're not going to get any traction. You're not going to get any bounce or propulsion. You're
Right.
just going to go flat. And I think that's what happens. Like, for example, I don't want to get too personal or too autobiographical, but like, say something happens and, oh, my marriage isn't doing so well, so let me spring into action. Well, when you spring into action off the platform of independent Baptist dogma, it turns out that's a broken diving board, and it does not help solve the problems.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
Hmm.
if we were grounded in something real that wasn't
What
Jumanji
what
or
word?
Dungeons and Dragons
What word
equivalencies,
did you say? Grounded?
grounded,
Grounded
yeah,
in
grounded
the earth.
in the earth, grounded in something real, something close. Yeah,
Yeah. So you see, like the emphasis now that I'm hearing is a notion of uh or a contrast of appearances versus realities. And in this structure that you and I are articulating, we think that what's more real is the things that we assent to, the statements of faith about the propositions about God, that those are the real things. But under terraforming, no. The
yep.
more real thing is in the ground.
That which is most imminent to you, that which you're
Yes.
most in relationship with.
Right.
I'm in
What is
relationship with
imminent
the
is what.
air, with the floor, with the
Yes.
feelings of emotions inside my body.
Yes.
I have real relationships with those things.
That's more imminent. It's more real. And that's what you want to be grounded in. I'll say it again. That's what you want to ground. Put the truck in the ground, into reality, into what's more real. Stop assenting, stop transcending into these propositions, into these far off sort of statements that you have no business, you have no real grounding uh to 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 assent to. Put yourself in the ground, right? So this is again like the posture with which the orientation, the stance that I think we are taking, that we intuitively like with the trans descendants, with descending first. Did Jesus ascend or did he descend first in the story of the Bible? Which came first?
Well, he descends.
He comes down. And then here's the best part. He ascends once And then guess what? He's coming back. He's going to descend for the second leg. There's two legs. There's
So
two
yeah,
descent.
that was going to be my next question. Like, what are the two legs of transcendence? Like,
So,
I'm kind
yep,
of lost on that. I don't feel like I
yeah.
have anything to grab there.
Okay. So there's there's two senses on of it, but there are also two motions of it, right? So in the Republic, the philosopher king descends twice. In the narrative, in the story of the Bible, in the sequence of the Bible, uh this is making all my dispensational fellows happy. There are two dissensions. There's the first dissension, and then there's the second dissension, which is the second coming, right? So those are the two legs, but there's also semantically those are the two descending movements, right? They happen twice. But then there's semantically two meanings, two senses in which um you want to think about the notion of descendants. There's the imminence of descendants, which is the here now to the body, right? But there's also the future descendants, which is those who you will who will come after you, those who from which you, upon your first descendants you planted into the ground, those that will, for the sake of the future descendants, are those, they are your descendants. You see what I'm saying? The two semantic senses.
Yep. So you
Okay.
descend and you have descendants.
Yes.
I
Which is why it's called trans descendants, because there's always, it's always coupled with a double. There's a double sense. There's a double movement of it.
so I want to say something now that it's toward the end of like a 2 hour video, so I'm hoping nobody's watching anymore because I'm going to say something that I haven't said yet and would get me crucified. In Philippians 2, if there be any consolation in Christ, comfort of love, fellowship of the Spirit, bowels of mercies, fulfill you my joy that you be like minded, being of one accord and one mind. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but each in lowliness of mind esteem others better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. And then he says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, descend, took upon him the form of a servant, descend,
Mm-hmm.
and was made in the likeness of men, descend, and being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Which, by the way, firstborn among many brethren would also be the other kind of descendants over there in like Romans 8, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Obedient to death, even the death of the cross, wherefore God also hath highly exalted him and given him a name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, things in heaven and earth, things under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it's God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. I'm sharing that for the sake of saying that when this is preached most of the time, when it is taught, it's taught as just, oh, have the humility of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I think about this, the more I believe that this is exactly the case for each one of us. Like every aspect of this story. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. This could,
Mm-hmm.
if you transcend and descend correctly and terraform and transcend correctly, then all of this is also true about you, the real
Yes.
you, the one in Romans, huh, the one in Romans 7:17 that can't sin. That aspect
Yes.
of you.
Yes.
There's no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. Verse 20. Now, if I do that which I would not, is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. The part that doesn't sin is everything in Philippians 2 that's said about Jesus is also true of you.
Right.
And it's just a matter of descending down into proverbial death
Yes.
is the
Yeah.
only thing between you and that which is worthy of everything else.
Right. Which is worthy of a name which is above every name.
Yes.
Right. And so it says, like you're in Philippians 2, that he thought it not robbery, being in the form of man, which by the way is a terraform. It's describing a terraform, which is a descending sort of form. To be in the form of God and the form and and likeness and fashion of a man. What I'm suggesting, who being in the form of God, that form is a terraform because that's what it's describing, right? Because you get these descending sort of descriptions like of low reputation of a form of a servant in the likeness of man juxtaposed with the likeness of God, which is a descension, became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. So we're going down, down, down. But then what ends up happening is he gets a name which is above. Now we're getting the vertical ascending sort of language there. But the important part, who being in the form of God, right? Because this is referencing, let that mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Ready? Who, right? Here's an example of that mind, who being in the form of God, right? So the mind that's in Christ Jesus is that mind which is being in the form of God. And what I'm suggesting is that that form is a terraform. The form of God, I'm suggesting, is a terraform, an earthing form, which has this coextensive movement of descendants and transcendence, right?
So, so this I might be going too far with this, but I was reading the document that you sent me,
Mm-hmm.
and I noticed that one of the interactive groups that exists is an acronym
Yes.
that spells out Tiamat.
Yes.
Well, mythopoetically,
Yep.
earth, ground,
Mm-hmm.
land is always
Mm-hmm.
feminine.
Yep.
And the feminine urge is to expand with security and stability and basically static knowingness.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as dynamic. And then the masculine urge is to do something, build a city, launch a rocket, something like that. But you have to do that from Tiamat, from the earth, from the ground.
Yes.
You
Mm-hmm.
have to have that feminine from that feminine form. The land has to, what do you call it, birth you out. It's
Yes.
interesting that birthing a ship, though it's spelled differently, sounds the same. Off from land. You have to launch off from land.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the more we think about this, the more uh, similarities will arise.
Yeah, and that's ultimately, which by the way, the Tiamat thing, 100%. I've done Tiamat tier 1 and tier 2, and what Tiamat is terraforming. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Sure as shooting, but that's what I'm attempting to offer and to try to see if people find utility in this idea, because that it's I think that it's that it's accurate. I think it's an accurate and clarifying uh notion as to what we're doing, and I think that it propagates and uh initiates and educes more insight, more more of a compulsion to kind of be like, ooh, okay, yeah, terraforming. That's terraforming. And it kind of snowballs a little bit. And I want to see, what the people in FSI think about this. And try to, work back and forth to help me articulate this a little further and see what utility it might have. Um, yeah,
So when I think of, I said it earlier in the video, earlier in this session, when I think of terraforming, I think of taking an inhabitable place and making it habitable, like we usually think of it in science fiction. But it's now, as we're talking, it's occurring to me that terraforming happens all the time on habitable Earth to make it habitable in different ways,
hmm
in transcendent ways. Like I
hmm
can be on the Earth living under a palm branch, or I can terraform and be in an apartment complex. But I have,
aha,
you see what I'm saying? So
yes,
I've altered the terra, the Earth,
yes,
in order to inhabit it in a transcended way.
yes, yes, yes,
That
and to the degree that you have inhabited it in a more transcendent way will allow you to help you leverage the capacity to inhabit it in a more transcendent way for
yes,
those who will come after you. Because
yes,
living under a tree is not as conducive uh, to your descendants as living in an apartment.
yes, yes. We get criticism a lot of times because it's always criticized. No matter how much you get, you always want more. And I don't think if you're thinking about greed, I want another Ferrari and another yacht. That's one thing, but the drive to expand into something new and better and more is a human drive that is intended for positive co-creation of the environment to facilitate transcended living.
Yes.
And so it's healthy and proper and right for people to have aspirations to build and do more and better things. Because, like you just said, the the more I set myself up fundamentally now, the more I'm in a place to leave something for my descendants. We have trans
Boom.
descendants already here. Like, think about all the technology that we have, all the knowledge of our past that we have. We stand on
Yeah.
the shoulders of everybody who has come before us and all the knowledge that they have accumulated in order to produce all the things that we enjoy today. And all the things that we enjoy today, hopefully, will transmit down into future generations so that they can do more than we did.
Yes.
And if you're living just a subsistent life under a palm branch somewhere, you're in less of a position to provide
Right.
shoulders on which
There's
those after
there's
you
less
can stand.
there's less potential. There's less of that potential space from which
Yes.
more valuable things can emerge. That's why Jordan Peterson references the Pareto distribution all the time, is
Yep.
because to those who have much, much will be given. Right. So what you're doing is you're following the geometry, you're following the orientation of the dynamical system that is terraforming of transcendence and transdescendence. You're following meta drives that you have to be connected to something that's more real, right? That's the meta drive to transdescend. But there's also a meta drive to like move forth into higher things and propagate, right?
So you
So
kind of owe it to yourself, to everyone around you, and to everyone who comes after you, to, like the army says, be all you can be.
yeah,
Become and be everything that you possibly can be, which
yes,
may mean building something in this life from which more things can descend.
exactly,
Higher
exactly.
quality, more transcended things can descend from. So you have the both. You have transcendence through descendants.
Yes, e- exactly. You have
So
transcendence
that's
through
probably
descendants.
why the word is called
Because,
transdescendants.
right, because you have the coextensive movement. It's like, they're inseparable. They're inseparable for the terraformer, right? So yeah, I think that's a really, really great start. Like a really great start. I feel invigorated. I feel, to a degree right now in my body, I feel terraformed because I feel rooted and strong, but I feel a sense of like vitality with you right now that this could go on. Like we could keep going on this. I feel strong. I feel very strong. Right now. So, and this is like, again, the sort of thing that I think we're doing in trying to ameliorate the meaning crisis. We're trying to terraform, you know?
Yep. Yep. Well, I'm at the end of the time that I've got. I have to be somewhere soon. Is there anything you want to say to wrap us up?
No, I mean, I think that was really great. I do want to thank you. This is going to be a long project for me. It'll go on for the better part of like 6 to 7 months.
Yep.
So I really appreciate. I want to really appreciate uh the ground that's been cultivated uh through FSI and beyond the fundamentals, and with a sense of like, chutzpah, like Jacob wrestling with the angel, being like, okay, well, okay, you're gonna bless me. So, with that kind of sense, I want to be like, well, you guys are gonna bless me. So,
If you ever
um,
get a chance to hear Dr. Orion Taraban talk about the story of Jacob wrestling with the angel, you will laugh.
what's
It
the
is
guy's
great.
name?
Huh?
What's the guy's name?
Orion Taraban.
Oh, Ryan Terraman.
When
Okay.
he talks, he's not exactly a Christian teacher. He's a psychologist.
Okay.
Talks about relationships a lot, but he does have one episode about Jacob wrestling with the angel, which is pretty great.
Okay.
So I want to give out a little disclaimer to anybody who's listening to this who may be like, cocking your head a little bit. And what we are doing here, we are not transmitting out dogma that people have to believe or do. It's not about being right or wrong. It's just a framework that may or may not provide purchase for you. It may or may not be practical for you or pragmatic for you or helpful for you. If it's not helpful for you, it's okay. Okay. A lot of Christians here, they're used to everything being dogma, and they think that everything you say is another belief you're trying to shove down their throat, which makes them want to push back. It's just a model. And if it helps you, great. If it doesn't, also it's fine. Okay. Nobody, if it's not something that helps you, you don't have to demonize the people that talked about it. There's no need for any of that. We're just trying to help folks um, avoid some of the suffering that we've been through and have seen others go through. That's all it is. So that's all I want to say about that.
Amen.
If you like what you're getting here on Beyond the Fundamentals, we invite you to support the channel. Couldn't do this without you. It takes a lot of time, space, resources, energy, and money, and software and hardware to do this stuff. We have a QR code in the corner of the screen. If you can grab onto that, which will take you to our donate page. And also say prayers when you get a chance for Nick and his endeavors with his master's thesis coming up in this 6 to 7 month project. 6, 7 um, coming up. So yeah, thanks for coming on, Nick. Thanks for sharing this with us. I know it's takes a few minutes to really peel back the onion to get to the idea there, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin.
All right, everybody, thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you, and good day.